The first time I watched myself die, I was eating cold Chinese food on the couch and trying not to cry about a voicemail from my ex. The TV remote slipped between the cushions, and the channel jumped on its own static, a cough of blue, then an image so familiar my breath stopped. It was my living room, same thrift store lamp, same crooked thrifted print of a heron over the TV, same water ring on the coffee table, except the clock on the cable overlay said 12:41 a.m., October 13th. Tomorrow, at least from where I sat, and someone was standing behind my couch in that picture, a shape like a man cut out of the dark. I live on Ridge Road in Parma, Ohio, one of those brick apartment blocks with hallways that always smell like boiled cabbage. My door has 2 locks and a chain that never lifts fully because the screw is stripped. I'm not careless. I don't drink much. I teach middle school English and lose sleep over kids who hate books. I am not the kind of person who sees things. But when Channel 137 blinked to clarity, there was my living room, and a presence in it that was not any of my students' fathers. Not a boyfriend, I didn't have one anymore. Not a neighbor I'd recognize. He was just a cutter to hole that the room bled into, the kind of dark that refuses to accept light. I went cold. I stood slow and turned to look at my own empty room. No one. The couch was empty. The lamp hummed. I swallowed a laugh and sat back down, telling myself it was an old footer, a prank, a glitch. I switched to Channel 138's infomercial knives. 136 local preachers selling prayer napkins. Back to 137, my living room again. The angle was from near the ceiling, as if a camera were taped in the corner, fisheye slight. My thrift store lamp cast a lemon slice on the wall. The overlay had the cable company's logo and a small text at the bottom. Mirror. The time stamp ticked 1 second forward, then another. I lifted the remote and pressed guide. Channel 137 was listed as local access. The description box was empty. There was no number to call, no show title, nothing. Just a black rectangle around the word mirror, as if that explained anything. In the screen, my front door chain fluttered. I felt wind on my cheek. I looked. My actual door was still, the chain steady. On the TV, it rattled again. No, I whispered to no one. I got up and walked to the door, put my eye to the peephole. Yellowed hall light. Someone's footsteps far away. I looked up and traced the corners of my ceiling for a camera that didn't exist. I live alone. I would know if there was a camera. When I turned back, the TV feed had changed. It said 12:43 a.m. now. The figure behind my couch had moved closer. Not in an animated way, just the difference between 2 photos. Closer. Almost where I sat in real life. As if he could reach out and put his hands on my shoulders. I grabbed my phone and opened the camera and took a picture of the screen, because somehow I wanted proof of insanity. The photo showed my living room. It did not show the figure. It was just an empty room, my couch, my lamp, the heron print. I took another, same. I pressed my finger into the screen as if I could smudge him and felt nothing but glass. A breath shuffled across the back of my neck. I spun around so fast I knocked the takeout off the coffee table. Hello. My voice sounded fake, like an actor pretending to be brave. The apartment was quiet furnace clicking on somewhere in the building, a pipe ticking like a metronome. My phone buzzed in my hand, a spam text, and I almost screamed. On the TV, the me in the future walked into frame. I recognized the hoodie, the thrift store sweatpants. My own eyes, a little swollen from crying, came into the shot and settled on the couch. I looked exhausted. I didn't see the figure behind the couch. I didn't even look up. The timestamp said 12:45 a.m. October 13th. Tomorrow. The figure behind her eased one step forward. I don't know why I did it. I walked to the wall where the angle on the TV suggested the camera would be. There was nothing in the corner but wall paint and a speck of dust that, once seen, could never be unseen. I pressed my palm there. It was cool. In the living room on the screen, the me of tomorrow sat down, rubbing her face, unaware that something leaned over the back of the couch, darkness shaped like a man. It lowered its head as if smelling my hair. My phone flashlight came on without me touching it. The beam swung across the room, and for just a second my real wall gave a shine back as if caught on reflective glass. Then it was paint again. My throat hurt. I backed away, tripped over the takeout, and landed on hands and knees. On TV, I watched myself flinch at something behind me, like a whisper. I watched my own mouth form a question I couldn't hear. I pulled the plug from the wall. The TV went black. The apartment felt instantly bigger, like shutting an eyelid on a nightmare. I started to breathe again. Then, with the TV dead and the plug in my hand, the screen flickered back on to channel 137. The timestamp rolled to 12:46 a.m. The me on the screen slowly turned her head toward the camera, as if hearing a sound from inside the wall. But I didn't close my eyes that night because the TV did it for me, blinked once like a living thing, then steadied into that fishbowl view of my life as it would be. The timestamp ticked 12:47 a.m. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. It didn't line up with the seconds, a syncopated dread. The figure that wasn't either in my room leaned over to Mommy's shoulder like a bad idea. The overlay at the bottom, the one that said mirror in a thin, white font, jittered as if it were breathing. I hit the TV with the heel of my hand. Nothing changed. Parma is loud in the wrong ways. People yell in the parking lot and pipes complain, and the Coke machine downstairs eats change like an animal. But my apartment went the kind of quiet that isn't silence insulation. Quiet. Tomb quiet. Where any sound you make is guilty of being alive. I said no again. Because trying to convince a screen is easier than calling a friend at midnight to say you think you're being haunted by a channel that knows your tomorrow. I did the rational thing first. I pulled out my laptop. Fingers shaking so hard I typed channel 137 HACK. Like I was drunk with fear. The Wi-Fi spun and didn't connect. I clicked the network icon. It showed my router name, full bars. And a new one I had never seen. MIRROR137. Its lock icon was open. I shut the laptop and felt stupid and small. Next rational thing, call the cable company. The hold music was a piano loop that hopped a beat every 30 seconds, like it had a limp. An automated voice told me the wait time was less than 4 minutes. The figure on the TV slipped another photo click closer on screen. Tomorami rubbed her eyes and reached for the remote. She didn't look back. The way I watched myself not look back made my stomach feel wet and wrong. Like I'd cut something in there. A clatter sounded in the hallway, metal on metal. I went to the peephole. Mrs. Novak from to be shuffled past in her pink slippers, balanced a bag of laundry on her hip and paused right outside my door. She turned perfectly toward my peephole, as if she felt me watching. Her eyes didn't have whites for a second. They were TV static. I blinked hard, and they were eyes again, watery and old. She lifted one hand and touched my door, right where the chain would rattle on TV. Her lips moved without sound. The cable hold music, juddered, glitched, and then a man's voice came through. "Thank you for calling me," it caught, corrected. "Midwest Cable. How can I assist?" There's something wrong with channel 137, I said. I sounded too calm. "It's showing my living room right now." "Or, no, tomorrow." The man paused for a long beat, his breathing doing what the mirror overlay did. "Can I get your account number?" I gave it. He typed. The keyboard had the same click my own laptop keys have. "Okay," he said finally. "I'm going to run a signal refresh. Please don't turn off your television." And, he trailed off. The line filled that awful hold piano again. My mouth went dry. The set said, "Oh," but it was just the loop, hopping its beat like a broken heart. On screen, the time stomp ticked to 12:50 a.m. Tomorami stood, shivered, and wrapped arms around herself. The figure leaned so close to her ear it made me flinch. Its edges were wrong. They smeared when they moved, like heat above asphalt. I whispered, "Please." I didn't know who I was asking. The lamp beside my couch, my real couch, buzzed like a hornet. The bulb brightened, humming, and then dimmed, leaving a lemon bruise of light that made the corners look like holes. The air conditioner clicked on, though it wasn't that warm. From somewhere in the ductwork came a wet, slow drag, as if something heavy were pulling itself along on elbows. I backed toward the TV like it could protect me. My phone lit up of its own accord. A calendar alert. But I didn't. T-set slid down the lock screen. October 13th to 12:59 a.m. Answer the door. I fumbled it open. There was no event, just that alert, like a dare. The minute it took me to delete it. The TV cut to a commercial for a bail bondsman, then cut back, like it needed a breath. The figure behind Tomorami had tilted its head as if listening for a knock. It knew. I pulled the chain on my door. Even though the screw was stripped, even though every horror story says not to, the chain trembled under my fingers as if a draft were there. I pressed my ear to the wood. The hallway was a seashell roar, pipes and distance. I could hear Mrs. Novak humming something. No, not humming. The piano hold music. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail from an unknown number. I put it on speaker. There was breathing. My breathing, and a whisper I recognized because I heard it from my own mouth. When I was 12 and my father died, and I wanted him to come back. Dante open. On the TV, Tomorami walked to the door. The second hand on the cable overlay, climbed toward the 60 like a diver on a ladder. I stood in my apartment with a chain in my hand, my ear against wood that felt cold and sure and final, while a program about my death played in a room where I was also alive. Someone knocked soft as an eyelash on skin. The time stomp rolled to 12:59 a.m. The knock came again, more certain. I whispered, "Who is it?" Because manners are hard to kill. On the other side, my own voice answered, "It's me." I didn't answer at first because my throat closed around the word like it weighed 100 pounds. On TV, Tamarami asked, "Who is it?" And my voice answered, tinny through the door. In my real hallway, the knock had been gentle. On TV, it was slower, as if whoever stood there wanted me to memorize it. The second hand on the overlay tipped past 12. 1 a.m., October 13th, rolled up on the screen like a verdict. "Please?" my voice said from outside my actual door. Not a stranger faking it. Me. Same rasp I get when I cry teaching the outsiders and the kids pretend not to see. "Please, I forgot my keys." The chain in my hand hummed against the wood. I looked at the spy hole. The fisheye made the hallway a tunnel, empty. The fluorescence in the ceiling buzzed with that insect electricity, pooling over the brown carpet like stale water. I pressed harder, as if my eye could push through into the hall. Nothing, just that sound like the coil in a refrigerator, and the limp little piano loop from someone's TV to floors down. On channel 137, Tamarami stood at the door and did exactly what I was doing, leaned into the peephole. But in the TV's view, there was a figure. Not me exactly, but the negative of me. The cutout dark, standing inches from the door. It had my height, my hair shape. The outline of the hoodie hood was perfect, but inside it was the same untakeable black. My stomach turned like gravity had shifted sideways. I whispered, "You aren't me." And my voice on the other side said, almost laughing, "I know." A low clunk echoed inside the wall behind my couch reel. Not TV. Like a service hatch opening somewhere in the bones of the building. Cold air draped itself over my ankle. The lamp went brighter again, bleaching the heron print until it looked like a smudge with an eye. I walked backward, heel catching on the fallen takeout box, and the soy sauce bled across the carpet in a black fan. The cable overlay hiccuped. The word mirror flickered and became mirth, then was whole again. A thin distortion line crept down the screen, bisecting Tamarami's face, so that her left eye lagged a fraction behind the right. She lifted her hand to the chain. On the TV, I could see a thin silver screw flex where the stripped hole had been. I knew how it would give. I'd watched it not hold a dozen times. "Don't," I said to her, to me, to anyone. And my voice at the door said, "Patient now, open, open, open," like a metronome, like the pipes. I threw the deadbolt. It made a sound like a little coffin slamming shut. The knock stopped. Silence filled in, thick as bread. Somewhere outside, a fox screamed. Parma has them. I've heard them before, that sound like a woman being hurt. I clamped my hands to my ears, and the scream got smaller but did not go away. It just became a needle inside my skull. On the TV, Tamarami turned away from the locked door and walked back toward the couch. She didn't scream. She looked tired. The figure by the couch straightened, pleased. I grabbed my keys and shoved them into my hoodie pocket. My brain had a simple, sharp thought: leave. I could go to my car. I could sit in the Walmart parking lot all night under those lights that make everything look like it is floating. I could text Jen from work, the one who says "girl" like a comma, and beg her not to ask questions until morning. I slipped into my sneakers, not bothering with socks, and the rubber squealed on the tile as if the floor were wet. I grabbed my bag. It felt heavier than it should have, like something extra was inside. The lights in the hallway died. The thin strip of brightness under my door went dark, like someone had put their palm over the sun. My breath fogged in front of me. I hadn't seen my breath inside since the heat went out on Christmas. I pressed my phone screen to life. The banner at the top said Mirror 137 connected. I snapped the Wi-Fi off. It turned itself back on. I turned it off again. It came back. A text thread bloomed from an unknown contact. Mirror. The first message arrived with the tiny, cheerful pop of a bubble. Now you see. The second. A photo of me from tonight, kneeling on the carpet, picking up noodles, my hair falling forward. The third. A live photo. The kind that moves if you press it, of me asleep on my own couch. Except I had not slept. I pressed it and watched myself breathe 3 seconds. My eyes fluttered. Something in the darkness lowered itself behind me like a lid. I yanked the door hard enough to make the chain sing. The deadbolt held. I shoved my shoulder into the wood. The stripped screw at the chain squealed, stretched. "Please," the voice outside said. Higher now, almost sobbing. Which is exactly how I sound when I'm a heartbeat from breaking. It's so cold. The smell of wet concrete poured in, that parking garage damp that gets into your clothes. Don't leave me out here. I'm you. On TV, Tomorrow Me dug her hands into her pockets and fished out her keys. She stared at them like she couldn't remember what they were for. The overlay ticked 1:07 a.m. The figure by the couch whispered without sound, shoulders shaking like it was laughing, and pointed at the place in the corner where the camera would be if there were one. I looked at my real corner. That speck of dust winked back, almost like an eye deciding whether to open. I took 2 steps toward it, and the entire wall went a shade darker, like a cloud had covered a sun that didn't exist. In the hallway, something pressed against the door. No knock now, just wait, like a body leaning its cheek. The wood bent the smallest amount. I could feel warmth bleeding through, and then the exact cold outline of my palm on the other side, matching mine. I held mine there for 1 raw, stupid second. It fit. My breath synced with mine. I felt the chain decide it had done all it could. The screw said a small, defeated yes. "I'm not opening," I said, and the meowt eyes said, soft and certain, "You already did." On the screen, Tomorrow Me slid the chain free. The chain in the TV world fell with a bright, domestic clink that made the air in my real apartment curdle. On channel 137, Tomorrow Me stood with her hand still on the door, as if she could take it back. The figure by the couch turned its head toward the hallway, listening to something I refused to hear. The overlay hiccuped, 1:08 a.m. I felt the tiny gears in that time stomp moving like teeth in my own jaw. "I didn't," I whispered, to prove to myself that I still had a mouth. I shoved my desk chair under the Nabba Petty barricaden, slid the heaviest book I owned, the complete Shakespeare, ironically against the threshold like paper could fend off physics. A grinding noise answered from inside the wall, soft and hopeful, like a key learning how to be a key. A new thing appeared on the TV that I hadn't noticed before. In the lower right, barely a watermark. A tiny box icon outlined in white with a number inside it, 3. It fluttered when the mirror label breathed. I grabbed the remote and stabbed at buttons, until a menu bloomed over the image. Mirror playback, -feed 1, feed 2, FEED 3. My thumb hovered over feed 2, because there it was in the corner at 2. I told myself I would not change anything. Then I pressed it. The screen lurched to a different room. Not a different apartment, no. The same dimensions, the same bad paint, but stripped of my things and filled with shapes covered in plastic. The camera's impossible reflection was behind a sheet of dust. The timestamp read 12:47 a.m., October 12th, yesterday, in the center of the room. A lump under a painter's tarp breathed gently in and out, the kind of breathing you do when you're trying to fool someone into thinking you're asleep. The tarp lifted a hair with each inhale. My hand went numb around the remote. I pressed fee 3, a hallway. Not mine, longer, narrow as a throat. White doors repeated into distance. The carpet was hospital gray, unpatterned, and the exit sign at the end glowed with that weird, sickly green some buildings use instead of red. The timestamp said 1:08 a.m., October 13th. Now, the lettering on the nearest door plaque was too soft to read, like the camera didn't want me to. Something moved just past the edge of the frame coattail. A sleeve. The suggestion of someone who didn't care if you saw them because you already had. I switched back to feed 1 with the guilty relief of pulling your hand out of fire. Tomorrow on screen dropped her keys. 1 skated under the edge of the door. I felt it through my bones like a bad memory. No, I told her, but she wasn't listening because I never listened either. The figure by the couch stood very tall now, larger than the ceiling could reasonably hold. A perspective trick that made my stomach tilt. It put its hand on the back of the couch where her head would go, practicing. The watermark number in the corner blinked, 3, then 4, then back to 3. Like the TV had considered offering me another feed and changed its mind. The apartment smelled like freezer burn. My breath had little ghosts in it. In the ductwork, the slow drag continued. Pull, rest, pull, rest. I imagined fingernails, scuffed raw. I imagined elbows dark with carpet. I imagined the thing's mouth open against the dust, savoring it. I touched the corner where the invisible camera lived and felt the tiniest whisper of warmth against my palm, like breath from the other side of glass. You see me, I said, because I suddenly understood that this wasn't a broadcast. This was a conversation with a wall. My phone chimed. Another calendar alert I didn't set. 1:12, check the vents. The cruelty of it made me laugh once, ugly. No, I said, even as my feet took me to the nearest vent. The screws were old, slotted. I fetched a butter knife like an idiot in a movie. The metal squeaked as I turned. Wind kissed my knuckles, colder the deeper I went, until the grate loosened enough to lift. I set it down on the carpet and crouched. Inside, the dark was thick as felt. I leaned closer. A thin smell, rose metallic, sweet, the way pennies taste on your tongue. From far down, something ticked 1 ping. like a nail bouncing once. The TV brightened, forcing my eyes up. On screen, Tomorami knelt to look under the door for the lost key. As she bent, the figure leaned with her, mimicking a lover. Its head tipped, curious, and its shape was suddenly wrong in a way that made my mouth flood with spit. It had too many corners to be a body. The door on television eased a sliver, opened just enough for a new shadow to spill in, like water finding low ground. The chain was off. The deadbolt wasn't engaged. She'd done it. I had. I leaned farther into my vent and saw, at the very limit of seeing, an eyelid flutter. Human, I thought with wild relief. Human, because you want it to be human. You want rule. Then the eyelid opened, and it was my eye, gazing back at me from the dark, glassy and unblinking, set where no head could fit. I bit my tongue to not scream. My voice came from inside the duct, soft as lint. Come closer. The desk chair under my doorknob slid on its own an inch as if someone nudged it with their knee. In the hallway, my building exhaled the smell of wet winter clothing. The piano loop started again, louder now, as if a speaker had been set on my threshold. My phone switched to the camera and flipped to the front-facing view. I watched my face under the bad apartment light. Behind me, just over my shoulder, the corner of the room pulsed a shade darker, as if someone on the other side of the wall were drawing breath. The overlay's second hand buried itself into 1:13 a.m. on TV, with no ceremony, with the small sigh of something inevitable. Tomorami opened the door. Air moved through both worlds at once, and my vent breathed out my name and my father's voice from the day he died. When air moved through both worlds at once, every door in the building thumped in sympathy, a domino of wood and metal down the hall. My father's voice in the vent said my name again with the tiny patience he used when I was 5 and refused to come in from the yard. I couldn't breathe shallow enough to not inhale him. On the TV, Tomorami took one step backward, one hand still holding the door open, the other lifted like she meant to shield her face from wind that wasn't there. The figure by the couch uncoiled, tall now as the ceiling line, the wrongness in its edges multiplying like it could sprout new angles anywhere you looked away from. The first foot that crossed my doorstep on the screen wasn't a foot. It was a smudge that learned to be one as it moved. The camera made it look gentle, like fog gathering, but my body knew it as pressure, an ache in my molars, the feeling you get walking past trucks warming in winter. The overlay blinked. Mirror hiccuped to mirror. The little feed watermark shivered between 3 and 4, and then, bold as a dare, settled on 4. I thumbed the remote with wet hands, and new menu options opened, as if I'd earned them. Feed 4. I didn't press it. I pressed feed 2 instead, because fear makes you pick yesterday when today is unbearable. Feed 2. The tarp rising and falling. Except it wasn't. It had stopped. The tarp lay flat and meek across a shape that was now undeniably a peasant-sized outline. Dust motes swam like snow in a projector beam. In the corner where the camera shouldn't be, something bubbled the plastic from beneath, like a hand testing the air. A dark, wet halo spread where a mouth would be. The second hand, 12:47, rolled to 12:48. I jolted back to feed 1 and felt stupid for spending my terror on anything else. In my real apartment, the desk chair under the knob began to slide again inch rest slight. Whatever leaned on the other side only had patience for polite intrusions. The complete Shakespeare against the threshold buckled under the door, slow breathing, its pages lifting one by one as if a fan had been switched on beneath. The vent sighed my name and then changed it just a little, just enough to be not mine anymore. My phone buzzed. A call from Dad. It rang the exact ringtone he'd chosen 12 years ago over bright marimba that never once fit him. I declined it. It rang again immediately. I answered. "Don't make me knock," his voice said, gentle, weathered smooth by the miles between then and now. "Your mother's sleeping." "My mother died first," I said, before I could be smart. And then the voice on the line laughed once, a dry paper sound, and said in a not-me-father tone, "I never said this was a past tense house." On TV, Tomorrow took another step backward, giving the door more room. She glanced at the couch, at the lamp, at the corner of her, at the figure that ruined me. The way she refused to name the thing that wanted her felt like every bad habit I owned dressing itself as survival. The smudge that was a foot-feet now learnt my entryway, learnt the scratch in the floor where I'd dropped a bookshelf, learnt the shape of my rug. All the while, the wrong camera saw, and I saw, and between us something leaned closer to the wall. I grabbed the lamp by the neck and swung. It didn't feel brave. It felt like when a spider drops near your mouth and you accidentally make a noise your kids dare each other to imitate for a year. The bulb burst against the corner. Sparks spit a bright sneeze of light. In the flash, the paint over the camera bubbled like skin near a stove. For a second, a long, drowning second, there was something under it like glass. A hairline fracture ran across the corner where no seam should be, and a cold hiss came out hot, the way a freezer does when you hold it open too long. The screen stuttered through a lattice of artifacts over Tamarami. So she looked like she'd been printed on graph paper and someone had smudged the ink. The figure flinched. He didn't like the light. My dad's voice on the phone became many voices speaking almost together, like a choir that had lost its lyrics. "Stop," they said. "We're watching." I threw the lamp again, this time just the metal neck, and dented the drywall. My knuckles bled without hurting. "I know you," I said to the wall, to the duct, to my own stupid phone. "Maybe you're the thing that fills in when people die and leave holes. Maybe you're made of attention. You thrive on us looking. I don't care. Get out." In the hall, footsteps that were mine, but wrong hurried toward my door. The peephole shadow swelled a face too close. The chair shrieked as it skated. The deadbolt grated. The stripped screw at the chain audibly gave up in real time, a metallic exhale. The vent rolled its breath to a child's voice, then a teacher's, then my ex's, then me again. Trying on sympathy like a sweater, my TV blinked to feetful without my hand. The menu had said, as if this were what I wanted. The whole screen filled with an iris huge as a moon, ridged and oil-slick, contracting as my room brightened and dilating as my room dimmed. And in its pupil was the crisp reflection of my apartment from 100 impossible angles at once. I saw myself and the figure and the door and the duct and the heron print. And inside the black was a clock that had no numbers, only teeth. I tore the TV's cord out again. The screen stayed on where a good TV dies. So I picked up the only thing near me that could pass for a blade. The broken lamp's jagged bulb, and I carved a cross into the corner where the speck of dust had been. Not because I'm devout, because X marks the spot where I decided this wasn't allowed. The wall screamed like air rushed in from somewhere that isn't a direction. Every other direction screamed back. The figure faltered, its outlines softer, losing their extra corners like a nightmare at noon. In the same instant, the door in both worlds blew open, and something that was almost me but better at pretending stepped in with a smile that had my gums. "Okay," I said to everything at once. "Come and take it." When it stepped in, wearing my shape like thrifted clothes, it looked around with that dazed tourist sweetness people put on to make you like them. Up close, the seams were wrong. My eyes have a freckle in the left iris. Hers were clean. My front tooth has that chip from a wine glass in college. Hers were a tidy picket fence. The wrongness made my stomach want to crawl out of my body. She saw the XID carved into the corner and smiled like ID, left a welcome mat. "You weren't supposed to notice," she said, and even the way her tongue hit the T sounded kind. That was the worst, the kindness. It's better when you don't. On TV, which was still on though unpowered, the eye watched us from the pupil's well, contracting and stretching as if the room's light were my heart. On the overlay, that merciless clock fixed itself at 1:14 a.m., like it wanted me to sweat there forever. The figure by the couch angles, shaved away by the scream. I'd pulled from the wall ripped into the vents with a sigh, like it had been folded back into a pocket. My phone vibrated, a calendar alert. I didn't set 1:15 decide. I said no and lunged. I'm not a fighter. I'm a teacher who cries over children's writing and bakes cookies that never come out right. But I am also my father's daughter, which means sometimes you pick the thing up and you hit the other thing with it. I drove the jagged bulb into the notmare's throat. It did not go in. It met a resistance that wasn't flesh, like shoving glass into gel that has opinions. Her smile didn't change. Her neck took the pressure, caved, and then rose back, smooth, indecently calm. She looked past me at the corner, at the X. At the crack end, her eyes went soft the way mine do when I want kids to trust me. "Don't you want to see it properly?" she murmured. "It's so lonely behind the glass." The corner breathed. The crack-eyed, carved, exhaled frost. If I pressed my ear there, I knew I would hear the other side moving the way a sleeping animal moves. Little paws twitching with dreams. Behind the drywall, a space waited, as intimate and wrong as standing inside your own mouth. The walls, voice it, had a voice now. 1,000-channel, hush said, almost tender, open, and I understood suddenly that the door had never been the door. I took a step back. The not-me took a step forward, and her feet didn't quite touch the floor, like she'd learnt walking by, watching me, and still got the beats off. She brushed a strand of hair behind her ear with my mother's gesture and said, "It's not about dying." She lifted a hand and pressed 2 fingers to my sternum and flicked, and my breath went off like a switch. "It's about replacing what won't be missed." My father's voice in the vent, careful as threading a needle. "She's just hungry, kiddo." Then lower, honest. "And so are you." Because I was. Not for meat. For relief. For a life where I don't look over my shoulder or fall asleep with the TV on, so my apartment feels like it's sharing oxygen with a stranger. For a version of me who is braver or softer or less tired. For an exit, it landed on me like dust. The not me smelled it. She smiled so small it broke me. I walked to the corner. Light from the parking lot outside came in through the blinds in jail bar bands. I laid my palm against the fracture, and instead of cool paint, I felt the thin shiver of glass. The cheap kind that spiderwebs when it breaks. There was depth behind it all, runes, the long throat of feed 3, doors repeating, a vacancy lit by exit green. I could open it. I could lean my weight against the house and peel it like an orange. If I went through, the not me could settle into my warm imprint and never worry about it not fitting again. Switch, she offered. A voice like I imagine mine will be when I am old and teaching fewer kids with more patience. No one will get hurt, she meant. No one that matters to you. The TV whispered, E-Y-E. The overlay ticked 1 second without moving its hand. The vent sighed my name, and then the exact syllables of my worst fear. That nothing I do matters enough to cause even a ripple. I laughed once in the middle of crying. It sounded like a bad edit. Look at me, I said. If you were me, you'd know we can't leave well enough alone. And I did the ugliest, most uncinematic thing. I called for help. My voice went into the building, into the bones of it, into every sleeping mouth. Mrs. Novak, I yelled. Help! Fire! Not because there was a fire, but because the human animal is wired to move for that word. I took the heron print off the wall and smashed it into the corner. The glass bred glass. The crack became a wound. The wound became a mouth. Cold poured out full of the smell of basements and emptied houses. The not me flinched. She hadn't planned on other people. Slippers slapped down the hall. Keys jangled. A man cursed. Mrs. Novak banged my door with little fists. Sweetheart, you okay? She called through wood that now shivered like skin. The eye on the screen dilated to eclipse. The not me showed me all her teeth and said, hate softening her vows. You're cruel. Yeah, I said. 2 things that forget I'm real. I threw the door open. The actual door would hit drywall. Mrs. Novak's staticky eyes were just eyes in an old face, wet with worry. She grabbed my forearms with hands that had folded 80 years of laundry. I heard, oh God, baby. Behind her, Mr. Garcia from 3C clutched a baseball bat in his pajama pants. The hallway shone too bright. Security fluorescence woke with a buzz. The not me took 1 step toward them, and she flickered. The more eyes on her, the dimmer she became, thin as breath on a mirror. The wall mouth behind me hissed open wider in panic, afraid of being left without me. The vent changed its mind too many times and fell silent like a dead thing. The TV dimmed to a polite reflection of the room. Back up, I told the neighbors. And when they did, I took my father's toolbox from the hall closet like it had been waiting for my hand this whole time. And I drove a flathead into the corner's crack and pride. The seam gave with a sob. Wind howled from the nowhere behind it. The not-me's hand touched my wrist and burned with cold. I'm not a monster, she said. Pooh. And for a second I saw past the edge of the rooms she'd stood in, the empty apartment, the unlived hours stacked like chairs, the ache of a mirror that never gets to be the thing it reflects. Pity stabbed me clean through. "I know," I told her, "but you can't be me." She blinked, as if I'd said no one had ever tried. And then the corner let go all at once, and the invisible glass shattered inward. The suction took her, the way Undertow takes dogs and children who don't know about rip currents. She grabbed at me. I gave her my hair on print instead. It went with her. A stupid saint's icon for a saint I don't believe in. The whole screamed. The building answered with door thumps. Mr. Garcia swore in Spanish that would make my 8th graders flinch. Mrs. Novak started praying in Polish. The eye on the TV showed a last still of my living room empty, really empty before caving to snow. Then it was just a corner again, cracked, ugly, drafty. I had drywall dust in my mouth and blood on my knuckles and 3 neighbors in their slippers staring at me like I DP'd on the common rug. We stood there, breathing too much. I laughed and told them something about a mouse, about a break-in scare, about insomnia. They forgave me because at my worst I look like someone who needs forgiving. I made tea at 1:30 in the morning for an old Polish woman who told me about the time her TV showed her husband knitting in the afterlife. Terribly, and a Puerto Rican man, who admitted Edie heard something humming through his vents for weeks and was too proud to admit he was scared. We talked the way people do after alarms stop, soft and silly, the energy looking for ground. When they left, I didn't close the door all the way. I let it rest against the latch so the air could go in and out like a lung. I unplugged the TV with both hands and set it face down on the couch. I taped cardboard over the corner until it looked like a bad patch on a bad tooth. I collapsed on the floor and slept without dreaming, if you Dan. Count the sound of the entire building breathing like it had been holding it too long in the morning. I called in sick and sat on the couch and answered emails from kids. Can I rewrite my essay? Do you have any extra books? Why does the world suck so much? I typed back, as if the questions were new, as if answering them mattered. I moved a week later, but that's not the point, because I still wake sometimes at 12:47 to the sound of a piano loop that hops a beat like it's limping. I still see the green exit sign in my mirror when there's none in the room. I've learned this. The thing in the wall hates an audience. It loves you most when you're alone and clever. It loves you most when you think you're not important enough to be haunted. I keep the door on the chain. I keep extra bulbs. I keep an X carved. A promise to myself in the corner of every place I live. When the TV wants to talk, I take it outside, set it on the curb, and let the neighborhood have it. The channel finds me anyway on blank screens, on microwave panels, in the black glass of a phone 5 minutes before bad news. If you flip to 137 after midnight and it shows you your tomorrow, don't look for meaning. Don't look for permission. Don't touch the wall. Go wake your neighbors. Make tea. Say the word that makes human animals run. And when the voice that sounds like everyone you've ever loved asks to be let in, remember, it's not about whether you deserve to be saved. It's about whether you're willing to leave the door open for someone else to try.